万门大学的小伙伴们，大家好，我是兰斐黎博士，是莱特研究大学的应用神经科学教授。我今天很荣幸给你们介绍 Barbara Burgess， 她是莱特基金会的 COO， 她今天要讲关于压力。那么我在北大读博士的时候发现，其实不仅仅在美国，也在中国压力很大，就是我们读书也好，或者工作也好，都会有很大的压力。压力会对我们身体有影响，也会对我们的生活的幸福感也有影响。那么今天 Barbara Burgess 会给我们讲如何去克服这个压力，而且如何去使用这个压力来生活更好。我们去看她怎么讲。
I'm so pleased to be here today and to be talking about a topic that I think is really important for all of us. Our topic today is thriving with stress. And we're talking about thriving, not just surviving or getting rid of stress or trying to get through it. And hopefully today we'll have some new insights on stress and how it affects us and how it doesn't affect us and what we can do about that today. We all live in stress each and every day. Whether you're at the university trying to achieve your best scores, or you're on your job trying to do the best that you can to get promoted and move ahead, or you're a parent who's juggling family and work life, or perhaps you're new to the workforce and just trying to find your way. Our lives are filled with stress, and in fact it feels often like stress is following us all the time. And sometimes that means that we're working hard. Sometimes stress comes to us because we're juggling many things. Sometimes we get stressed because things just don't go our way or the way that we had expected or predicted. Sometimes maybe our boss gives us some difficult feedback, and that's very stressful for us. Or perhaps we have an employee who's not responding well, and that can be stressful for us. Or maybe we have a project that failed, or perhaps we have a child that's sick or a friend that's sick, or perhaps we just had a lot of traffic on our way to the office and we were late. No matter what it is, we're all faced with stress every day. And what we want to be talking about is a new idea about how to be with stress, how to really use it as a way to be stronger and to thrive and stretch and grow and do our best. And we think it's a really worthy goal to achieve, is to pursue our thriving with stress and really succeeding with it. Now, there was a large study that they did with 30,000 individuals, and they looked at how these individuals responded with stress. And they asked them a question about, how do you feel about stress? How much stress have you experienced in the last year? Specifically is the question that they asked. They also asked him a second question, but I'm going to share about that in a moment. And the results were as you'd expect. So for those individuals who had experienced a lot of stress in the last year, they actually had a 43% increase in the risk of dying over over their lifetimes as they followed them over time. So just by having experienced so much stress, this was the first conclusion of their study. And similarly, the Wall Street Journal published a study that they did with baboons from the Ambalosi region of Kenya. And in this study, they studied all the different baboons in the tribe. And what they discovered is that the baboon that experiences the most stress is what they call the alpha male, so the head of the baboon pack, which isn't very surprising to us because when you think about it, that baboon always has to be fighting their way to stay to the top and to keep their position. So that baboon, when they really studied the physiology of him, they discovered that that baboon has the most stress in the tribe. But now let's go back to that large group of individuals they studied at the beginning, because I mentioned it wasn't the only question that they asked was how much stress they experienced. They asked a second question. They asked them, do you feel that stress is healthy for you or not? And this is where the results get very surprising. So in this particular study, what they discovered was for those individuals who believed that stress was harmful to them, that it was harmful to their health, they did experience the results we talked about. They had a 43% increase in their risk of dying and detrimental to their health. But here's where it gets really interesting. For those individuals who did not believe that stress was harmful to them, that stress is just a normal part of life, and that they had a regular relationship with stress, they experienced no adverse effects from the stress itself. So they did not experience that 43% increase. So this is not how we think about stress. We think that the stress is actually the problem, but in reality, it's how we experience or look at the stress that becomes problematic. And this all comes from research done by a woman named Kelly McGonigal. And she's done a wonderful TED Talk if you want to learn more about it. And she was very upset to discover the results of this experiment because she's a psychologist, a health psychologist, and she had been coaching individuals about this particular topic for over 10 years. And what she had discovered was that the advice she was giving people was all wrong, because she was giving them advice about how to get through the stress or avoid the stress or deal with the stress, when in reality, that wasn't causing their problem at all. And so it completely shifted her research and how she studied and what she looked at and the advice that she gave. Now let's go back to look at the baboons in Kenya. So we mentioned already, of course, that the alpha male experienced the most stress. But there was a group of scientists at the University of Notre Dame that took it a step further. And what they also found about this baboon was, in fact, the alpha male of the baboon group was 3 times as likely to recover from any kind of accident or harm, and in fact was very physically fit and healthy. So although that alpha male baboon was experiencing a lot of stress, in physical health he was doing tremendous, in fact much better than the baboons in the tribe who weren't experiencing the stress. And they did another similar study with workers in Britain, and there are more and more and more studies. And this particular study with the baboons was over a 26-year period. So it wasn't just a one-time instance, they really looked at the effect of this. So what does this mean for us? Well, perhaps it's not the stress that's the problem, but our relationship with the stress. And so what can we do then to improve our relationship with stress? And one way to think about it is to completely kind of shift our mindset. If we can really use stress as an opportunity to learn, to grow, to discover who we are, to see what we're made of, to develop ourselves, that's a very different way of looking at it. So yes, we're going to face challenges, but what do we do with those challenges? And so rather than really thinking about stress as the problem, it's actually our thinking about stress that's the problem. So it's not the stress itself, but it's how we view it, how we embrace it, and how we think about it. And I often use the analogy of a video game. So whether you play video games yourself or you know people that do, you think about playing a really good video game. If that video game went perfectly as you planned, if you knew exactly what to do, you knew exactly the next step to take, you knew where the pot of gold was, you knew exactly how to vanquish your enemy, you would never play the video game. No one would play it. There's no excitement, there's no adventure, there's none of that. And yet somehow we look at our lives as if they should be that way. We're walking around with a mythology in our mind that a good life, the right life, means there's no stress, no adventure, and no excitement, which not only isn't desirable, but it's just not ever going to happen. And so the real question is, how do we embrace that adventure of our lives? How do we take on our lives with all of its excitement and think about it differently? And so really it's not about the kind of outside things that are coming our way, but how are we responding to them? You know, what's our ability to respond, our responsibility in the situations of stress? And are we going to use them as opportunities to move backward, to close off, or are we going to use them as opportunities to discover who we are, to expand our capacity? And so I'm just going to share 3 concepts in the limited time that we have in this particular episode of ways to think about stress a little bit more. So the first thing is based on Kelly McGonigal's experience in her research, which is changing our perspective on stress. Really looking at it, as we talked about, as an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to develop ourselves. To really notice in the research study they did as a follow-up, and this is through Harvard, medical school, they took individuals as a follow-up to this study, and they had those individuals rethink how they looked at their physiology. So when we're stressed, yes, our heart beats more quickly, we may sweat a little bit, our palms may get sweaty, but if you think about it, those experiences happen in our body in other instances as well. So if we're feeling joy or having a moment of excitement, our heartbeat increases, our hands may get a little sweaty as well, and other experiences that way. So what they did with the individuals in this particular research study is they taught them to think differently about it. So if I'm here and my heart starts beating a little quicker, I can think about it, wow, what a great job my body's doing of being ready for action. It's a good thing my heart is providing circulation so that I'm ready to move and act. It's a good thing that I'm breathing a little more quickly because that's providing oxygen to my brain so I can think about it a little bit differently. And what they discovered in this particular study was those individuals who learned how to do this, who experienced the physical symptoms of stress, but who treated it differently, their blood vessels were actually more relaxed. So they didn't have, as we learned in the study earlier, the negative adverse effects on their bodies that the stress had. Instead, they just had an increased heartbeat. They had a little sweat in their palms, but they really were healthy and thriving. So that's one way for us to look at it. Another big way to look at it, and we don't have time to go into the full experience of this today, but is really looking at our relationship with our emotions, what we call our emotional intelligence. So oftentimes in our society, we have been trained and taught that emotions are bad or there's something to manage, but our Right Foundation has been studying emotions and emotional intelligence for over 30 years. And what we've discovered is actually quite the opposite. We've discovered a power in emotional intelligence that's amazing and can really help us achieve the results that we want in our careers and our relationships with our families. So I'm going to share just a little bit of the basics of that curriculum with you today. So the first thing that we look at is what's possible. They did a wonderful research study with multinational consultants. And these consultants, they trained in this emotional intelligence and they looked at their results over time. So these particular consultants, as they were trained, they had a 159% increase in their sales results. Amazing. So these emotions that we haven't wanted to pay attention to before, or we've wanted to avoid, if we can train ourselves, just like you would an exercise workout, if we can train ourselves to be with our emotions, we can improve our business results. Not only that, but those same employees had an 85% decrease in their employee turnover. So not only were they more successful on their jobs, they stayed with their jobs longer just by working on these pieces. So why don't we embrace emotions? Why don't we naturally just discover how wonderful they are? Well, we were raised with ideas about emotions that have caused us to look at the world in a certain way. We all were raised, no matter where we were, in the US, in China, anywhere, with negative messages about emotions. And they may look and sound different in every culture. But in the US, we might call someone a drama queen. They're living in a lot of drama, when they might be, but they might just be having an emotion or a feeling. Similarly, you might be called unprofessional. If you're moved by something, that might be the case. Or someone may tell you, just because you got angry, that you have anger issues. Well, maybe you do, or maybe you're just angry, and as a society, we're not quite used to embracing that anger. Or maybe when you were young, you were called a scaredy cat, or a crybaby, or something like that. So we're raised with these negative messages about emotions. And so as we grow up, we try to avoid them, we try to manage them, we don't have a good relationship with them. So as adults, as we want to increase our emotional intelligence, we really want to understand that this will be a little challenging for us because we've been raised to think the opposite, but it opens up exciting possibilities for us. And at the Right Foundation, when we're teaching about emotional intelligence, we teach 5 primary emotions: fear, hurt, anger, sadness, and joy. Well, now you may be watching this and think, well, I'm not really afraid today. well, maybe you're not afraid, but maybe you're nervous, maybe you're anxious. Those are all signs of fear. They're little indicators that you're experiencing fear in your body. So part of our education when it comes to emotions is learning to identify the little signs that tell us we're experiencing an emotion. Similarly, you may say, well, I'm not angry. You may not be angry, but are you annoyed at somebody? Are you irritated? Then you're experiencing anger. You're just not used to identifying it that way. Similarly with hurt, with sadness, with joy, maybe you're just enthusiastic. Well, that's joy in your body. You're just not used to naming it that way. So as we work on our emotional intelligence, we want to teach ourselves to start to notice those feelings, to be able to embrace them in all their formats, so that we develop a new language, the language of our emotions. And the emotions are really designed to move us away from pain and toward pleasure. And perhaps in another episode we can talk a little bit more about that. But what we really want you to understand is it's a perfect part of our design. We don't want to manage our emotions. We don't want to avoid our emotions. We want to use them. We want to use them for the beautiful design that they were intended for us. But first we have to learn about them a little bit more. And so as we do this, we get to practice, just like an athlete practices for a big race. We get to practice noticing those emotions and then naming them. And so as we're talking about stress, being in relationship with our emotions has phenomenal results in reducing stress or reducing the adverse effects of stress, really. There's a Harvard researcher called Daniel Siegel, and he's done some amazing studies in this particular area. And he has a particular assignment that we use at our Wright Foundation called Name It to Tame It. So with Name It to Tame It, simply the act of naming the emotion for yourself, even if you don't say it out loud, helps reconnect the amygdala part of your brain with your prefrontal cortex, with your frontal lobe. Well, why do I care? Because when those are disconnected, when they're not communicating to each other, I might get afraid, but I freeze. Or I might get angry and I can't think straight. Well, if I can name my emotion, if I can name it to tame it, I reconnect those parts of myself. So I allow the emotion to be in my body, but I can make great decisions, I can move forward, I can develop tremendous rapport with my coworkers, my employees, my bosses. I can have a lot of phenomenal results by using the emotions rather than avoiding them. So a second concept for being with your stress is really to embrace the wonder of your emotions, to really use them to be in relationship with yourself. And if you can do that, then a lot of stress can come your way. And you can handle it because you don't need to avoid your fear, you don't need to avoid your anger, you don't need to avoid getting hurt. Instead, you can just say, I'm angry that you did this. I feel hurt by this. So we have a much more fluid relationship. It also allows us to soothe ourselves more powerfully as well. As babies naturally know how to soothe themselves. They might suck their thumb or cuddle a teddy bear or do a wide variety of things. But somehow as we grow up, we think we don't need this anymore. Oh, that's weak to nurture or soothe or tend to yourself. No, it's far from weak. The stronger leaders we are, the more risks we're taking in our business in the world, the more that we need to be able to soothe ourselves. And being in touch with our emotions can really help that, as well as just developing new ways of thinking about it. In one of the other episodes, Dr. Bob Wright talked about self-efficacy. Well, that self-efficacy is really understanding and believing that I can do something. So yes, perhaps a very stressful situation comes my way, but if I can develop a more positive internal way of talking to myself, I know it's challenging, I know it's difficult, I know it's stressful, but I can say to myself, I can do this. And I can practice that muscle of self-efficacy and be in relationship with my emotions. And the third concept that you can be with to help be in better relationship with your stress and to really thrive is the concept of having a higher purpose. A higher purpose has so many benefits in our lives. There are a lot of research studies on this. It not only reduces your stress, but it helps to increase your vitality, your aliveness. It actually reduces high blood pressure. There's study after study after study about the physical benefits of having purpose or meaning to orient to. So for me in particular, I'm filming this course for you because my purpose is to learn and to grow and to discover in my life, but to share that with others. So even if it would be stressful to do a class, I feel more purpose when I do it because I'm living toward what matters to me. So really understanding and orient to what's your bigger purpose can bring you meaning in any situation you face. Maybe you fail terribly at something. Well, did you learn from it? If I learn and I grow, well, then I'm fulfilling my purpose. And it brings meaning to every single moment of my life. It happens that there are no wasted moments. We don't need to get through stressful situations. We don't need to avoid stressful situations. In fact, we welcome them because those stressful situations help us become who we can become. It helps us step into the potential that we have as a human being. And if I didn't ever have stressful situations, I'm probably not living. So again, 3 ideas to think about and be with for your stress is to change your perspective about it, to really embrace it as an opportunity for yourself. Also to embrace your emotions and use them to be more in touch with yourself and to self-soothe where you need it. And last but not least, to really orient to purpose in your life. If we can do even any one of these things, we will of course experience stress in our life, but we'll feel fulfilled, we'll have meaning, we'll be healthy, and we'll really contribute to others in a way that matters. Thank you.